Welcome to Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness with your hosts Chris Noble and Bill Perotzman. In today's episode, we're talking about levels of consciousness among musical performers as compared to gurus and spiritual teachers. Along the way, we also touch on the consciousness of actors in Daredevils and attempt to discover the beauty of a peak performance and being in the audience at a peak performance. We tackle the role of a performance ego, compare the ways in which singers like Frank Sinatra and Elton John conveyed their gifts, and attempt to draw some conclusions from the unmeasurable evidence that we all can feel about what it means to be consciously awake. It's a daring adventure, but the invitation is to find a reliable personal way in to what brings you the bliss of deeper awareness. We'll be talking about all that and much, much more, as always, in these open conversations here on Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness. What are we talking about actually?
Well, I was saying to a friend of mine who just left my apartment, she was asking like, oh, you got your podcast recording? I'm like, yeah. She's like, what's the topic today? I'm like, oh, I have no idea.
Exactly.
No idea.
It's just like, let's pretend that we're getting it from the universe, downloading it right now. Like, oh, right. Dang, I don't like that.
I like that. Well, we did figure it out. So we got something juicy to talk about, which is basically consciousness, especially within ourselves, but within other people. And when you're around people that we can call high vibrational, you can call them really enlightened souls, perhaps, just people that are on a higher level of consciousness, higher level of awakening, understanding. Let's throw those terms around. You kind of get the gist of what we're talking about, and what does it feel like to be in that presence? What happens when you're around people or listening to people like that?
We're watching TV. The Grammys were on last night, so I didn't watch it, but I imagine, if you were sitting there watching the Grammys, you'd have a different response to everybody on the stage, right? And what would that feel like? Obviously there'd be a resonance for some of them that you really like, and some you wouldn't, or you didn't care for the music, or you liked other music better, or whatever. But that's a consciousness thing too, right?
Yeah, and you can feel with some artists that you can feel a lot of ego behind what's being said, or even performed. And then there's some artists where it's like pure expression, pure love, and all that kind of stuff. Even like with, I don't know why it just reminded me of like someone like Michael Jackson, for example, where at that level of fame, even still, there was so much love infused into his music and his performances. And wow, like you felt that higher level of consciousness, despite what all the tabloids and pop culture has made of him. And who knows what's true and what's not, but certainly can feel from the music and from his performances that really high level of consciousness, pure love that comes through. And you were saying before we started recording that you watch, like Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, and different even late night TV show hosts, and that's the same kind of sensation. Different hosts, different people, different consciousness give you a much different feeling. Right?
A completely different feeling. Yeah. And, I haven't seen a whole bunch of what Questlove has done. I really want to see the documentary that won for Best Documentary at the Oscars. But there's something about that guy. I can't really put my finger on it. Even just the little short clips that come out of the Tonight Show, right? Where they cut over to the band. And he's just this presence. You just get that feeling of a presence that's there. And I don't want to jump way out there and say that it's spiritual or whatever, but there's something you were saying about Michael Jackson. It's the same kind of thing. When you watch that, or when I watch that, I feel like something different is going on, than the average Joe, or than anybody else that you want to compare. Put them on the same stage. They don't hold on the band long enough, but certainly there's a connection that exists there that speaks in a way that is different, I guess. It's really hard to do this without judgment. So being judgment neutral about this, because some people resonate for things that are absolutely amazing and some people don't. And it's just a preference. It doesn't say anything about you. It's just a preference, right?
And it's also, in a way, a reflection of where you're at, perhaps, too, in your journey.
Oh, sure. You're like where on the journey you happen to be.
Exactly. I connected with artists when I was a teenager. Some that were still deeply connected, and I listened to again today. I'm like, yep, I can see why I like that. I can see like I still feel a lot of good kind of messages, good vibrations behind that. And then some artists that I love for the nostalgia, but other than the nostalgia, there isn't a whole lot going on because
Right.
I was in a different place in my level of consciousness at 14, 16, 18, whatever. And listening back now, I'm like, okay, cool. I enjoy the blast from the past, but otherwise, I could go without listening to that music now,
I
or
understand. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
we've put on old movies that used to make us laugh, and they don't make us laugh anymore. And it's just, we're the ones who've changed. The movie's the same.
exactly.
And then there's old movies that we just howl to, like we've seen them for the first time, that
Mm.
somehow are just, they still resonate that way.
Or they have
But,
new layers.
or
Have
that
you
the
ever
other,
get
you
that?
find, right,
Yeah.
you'd get new layers of meaning out of them. Sure. Sure. That's the difference between, literature and, not literature, whatever it is. And it doesn't make any of them less good. It's all good. It just speaks in a different way as we progress through our understanding. And you know what? So you were mentioning this before we started too. We're both sort of old souls, and we sort of resonate for a chronological age that's older than our own chronological
Definitely.
age.
Hmm.
And that's always been a kind of a burden for me because there's so much that's popular right now in the time that I've kind of missed. I have to go back and pick it up. Like I'm working backwards through the music I love and sort of coming of age musically at a much different age that I am chronologically. It's really weird. Like I didn't really get into the Beatles until I was in my 20s or something. I knew they were out there, I knew what the songs were, but to actually listen deeply into that, oh, it didn't hit me until much later than they were actually on the scene, which I totally missed. By the time, I was old enough to know who they were, really, they'd stop playing. you know?
And ironically, I'm like as a teenager listening to like Frank Sinatra
Yeah,
and the Beatles and just loving these like old Motown classics and being like, oh right, there's also pop music I should probably listen to.
right, right. Which is fine. But so I'm just sort of picking names out of the air here. But as you're listening to this, so pick any two performers that you love, you know, performers that you really love. And I don't know, let's pick Sinatra and Elton John,
Right.
just because, right?
Hmm.
And there's a sort of a difference in consciousness that exists. Totally different people, totally different kinds of music, uh, but you just feel a different sort of vibe when you're watching Sinatra than when you're watching Elton John. And I guess if anything we want to try to do is sort of break that down into the nuts and bolts of it today
Mm.
and see how we relate to being in the presence of a consciousness, and then take that to a level where, like, if you and I could sit with the Dalai Lama or somebody that we know is of higher consciousness or
Hmm.
can generally agree, like between the two of
Hmm.
us, but not the world, just between the two of us, you know, to compare. That could be a pretty cool conversation, right?
I'm into it, and I'm already starting to break it down. Like, okay, so we have two performers like Sinatra and Elton John,
Or anybody else you want to mention.
whoever. But I like these. Let's just keep like
We'll
this
keep
as an
those.
example,
Okay.
And so you've got things like life experience, and of course like deep aspects of who that person is, and then you look at someone like Elton John, who's sure singing lyrics that were written by another person, but he's singing and interpreting and bringing them actually kind of in a similar sense to what Sinatra would have been doing as well, but bringing in his life experience as someone who was a closet homosexual coming out, and then became to be his true self, and then had a very specific journey, very very different to someone like Sinatra, who I forget his actual like origin stories per se. I know he's also an actor and also just like those all around performers. Of course, was in the Rat Pack and had I feel like with Sinatra he had almost more of a his like an era or a history, like his music almost was like iconic for a time in history, or
Yeah,
a
yeah, I
time
think
in
that's true.
America or North America, and that's what I get always brought back to is like I'm in 1950 in New York City, and
Yeah. With
I'm
the
on
fedora,
Broadway. I got the fedora, I got the
cigarette.
nice suit, the cigarette. I'm at the
Yeah.
bar having a whiskey or something, and there's a smoky piano in the other room, and like that's the vibe. And then with Elton John, it's like colors and extravagance and big stages and lights and like really extravagant, elegant,
Yeah.
tapestries and just
Stacks of keyboards and
stacks of keyboards, rocking and rolling, like jumping up and down, slamming on the piano, and high energy, this and that. And it's just, it's obviously, yeah. Like I wonder if a big contributor is life experience and the specific feelings that the artist is putting behind the music.
so do you think Elton felt more of a need to sell the music? Or was he doing that because it was so incredibly amazing to just be him and perform this way in this environment that he created? I mean, he basically created the live concert that was so different for any, singer-songwriter of the time. I'm using the term lightly, I guess, because
Yeah,
although he
I know what
helped,
you mean.
Bernie Taupin wrote most of it, but that whole thing that was the Elton John experience, completely different and also just as magnetic as the Frank Sinatra experience.
Mm-hmm.
Of him standing in front of a big band and just,
Schmoozing with the crowd.
cruising and croonering, the
Just
whole
yeah,
thing.
like it's such a different experience, but authentically them. I mean, to a degree, right? Because it's a great question. How much of it's motivated by money? Not that especially in this day and age, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be compensated fairly and adequately for your creations. Nothing wrong with that. But I think especially back in the day, not too long ago, and still to this day and age, doing it for the sake of money and not for the sake of soul or sake of love or the sake of all that stuff, is you can feel it behind the music sometimes. So I don't know how much of a contributor that was. I'm sure it was contributing. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, that's a
And I'm sure
factor, right?
record labels have pressure. We know that. I mean, they're famous for a lot of that kind of stuff. And, big pop stars like that have huge influence. Therefore, they do have a lot of things that they need to, rules in some ways that they have to abide by. At the same time, you can't really create a show that's that magnetic and that powerful without there being that heart, that soul,
Yeah, that extra bit, right?
Right?
Which we're going to
Yeah.
call consciousness. Like we're going to
Let's
lump it
call
all in there and just say, whatever it was.
the extra je ne sais quoi, the extra X factor, whatever you want to call it, that extra pizzazz is it's the consciousness of the performer, of that personality, of that being, and like Sinatra, say what you want about mafia connections or
Right.
whatever, all the other fickle things in his life. He was not a perfect person by any stretch. However, what a persona, what a personality, what a charisma that is undeniable. And that's why it's so easy to just be sucked into that world, that smooth, like
Yeah.
wankiness.
Exactly.
you know?
And probably in a good way. I'm going to say probably in a good way.
Mhm.
I mean, goodness knows his music's been used for everything.
I know.
But I think generally speaking, if you had a chance to go see Sinatra at some point, that would be an experience that you'd want to have.
Yeah.
Even if it was not your favorite music, just being in the
Mhm.
room with the guy, you could tell your grandkids, right?
Exactly.
And I'd feel the same way about Elton John.
Mhm.
There's something about it. There's that je ne sais quoi. There's that thing that takes it from a Sinatra impersonator to the actual Sinatra, from the Elton John,
Yes.
as amazing as the musicals have been, right?
Mhm.
To that next level where it's really him.
Mm. Not an imitation of.
Not an imitation, not somebody playing his music,
Mhm.
but actually being there. And I've heard people say this about other people too. Like Bette Midler has that kind of presence.
I hear Paul McCartney too.
McCartney for sure. Streisand.
Mhm.
And it's not age and experience, because even Billie Eilish has that.
All the greats do. I think we can probably start to agree on that. All
Michael
the greats,
Jackson,
Michael Jackson, Prince. I mean, the list goes on. David Bowie. All of these, like, just like even if you don't like the music, you would definitely, even like someone like a Beyonce, like these performers
Oh, yeah.
that are like, you can't not be thoroughly entertained. Even
Right.
if you don't really like the music, it's just such a spectacle, such a force of nature, and like it's the energy too. Even again, like if you don't like Coldplay's music, their concerts are so euphoric and just so energizing. Having experienced them multiple times, like you don't have to like any of their music to not, you're gonna feel uplifted. Like it's
Yeah.
impossible not to. When you got 50, 60,000 people singing love songs, it's like, come on.
And it's more than talent, right? And it's more
Far
than
more.
skill, and it's more than
Mm.
it's that other thing that we're looking for here. And how does that work? And other, we're calling it consciousness, but it could be anything. I mean, who knows what it could be? There's some unmeasurable dimension of goodness in there.
Well, they talk about, the ether of like existence, essentially just being love. These out of body experiences, near death experiences, that we have like tens of thousands of records of now that have been documented in like ER rooms and highly like properly documented cases of people experiencing life after death. And one of the things they say is that it's essentially existence is love. You just literally exist into this frequency web of liquid of love. Like that's what really the fabric of our universe is. We can't prove that scientifically yet, or we might prove it and we might name it something different than love, but our consciousness understands that. And so when you see something that's of that high level of a spectacle, and we're just talking about music right now, but it's in
Yeah.
anything. And when you see that, I think it's because you're just getting such a level of love, even if the content doesn't have to be about love, but it's the love behind that content, I think is playing a big role.
So are we going to go out on a limb and say that Sinatra and Elton John had that, and that came through in spite of all of the fan craze and everything else that looked
Drug
like,
abuse and
yeah,
all
yeah,
the
like all of the
stuff,
rest of
yeah.
that, lifestyle, pick anything. Are we going to say that? And I'm thinking for myself, the answer is yes. I've never really thought about it this way before,
Me neither. It's
because
fun.
separating the person and everything that they do from the art, which we've talked about before, that's tough in
Mm-hmm.
many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But when the art speaks, what are you going to say? No, I'm not listening.
I think about like what's that satellite that we sent out many
Oh,
years
yeah,
ago.
Voyager with the golden record on the side
Yeah,
that's
with the
just
golden
flying into the
record.
universe. Yeah.
It's playing classic songs from planet Earth. There's going to be aliens that will obviously, interact with this at some point or another. And they'll be like, okay, like they're not going to know the backstory of Elvis or the backstory of Marvin Gaye or whatever other classic artists were on that, and Beethoven, whatever. And they're not going to know that. They're just going to hear the vibration, the sound, the music, and that's what their experience will be. So at the end, that is a way. I mean, you can definitely separate it. It's hard for us because we know the backstories, we know all the other things with these artists, what like their personal lives, but the music stands, the art stands on its own as a vibration, as a frequency of information, of love, of creativity, of all the other things that it is. So I think we can separate the two, and I think that's what still makes something is like an Elton John show so spectacular, even regardless of his personal life.
So go even farther out on this limb. If someone who has never heard Sinatra, Elton John were to listen to their music recordings, so we take the visual out of it, right?
Mm.
Do you think it would get through?
That's a great question. I mean, the thing we have to acknowledge is that it is subjective. Art is
Yeah,
subjective.
right.
So,
Well, maybe a Westerner, I mean, put it in a culturally appropriate setting,
okay.
you
Because
know?
that's the thing too. Like, let's say it's someone, an extraterrestrial. I like using, an alien or extraterrestrial as an example. It's someone that's not even on planet Earth that has no reference point, and
Right.
here's it. I mean, that is going to be purely subjective, I think. However, at the same time, I would like to think that, I mean, first of all, love is a universal feeling. I mean, it permeates throughout the entire universe. So even the extraterrestrials will feel that vibration, feel that frequency, and with those artists that we do feel a lot of that love behind, they will have, let's say, a higher likelihood of resonating with that artist or that song. But it's a good point. If you take out the cultural aspects, I mean, for me, Sinatra, a big appeal is the cultural aspect.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in the 1950s. I
Yeah.
love that era. I love the aesthetic of that era.
Yeah.
I love the movies from that era. So I'm definitely biased too. That's for sure. That's a good point. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm trying to evolve a point on it as we're discussing here, because there's some music that I love in this world that's like Icelandic or Scandinavian. I have no idea what they're saying. It doesn't matter actually, because the music is what
Beautiful.
grabs me,
Mm-hmm.
and the harmonies and the combination of stuff. There's I think they're from Sweden. It's a choral group, like a cappella group, maybe 4 women's voices, and their music is just eerily sublime. It just has
Mm.
this incredible sense about it. I don't know what they look like, and I don't know what they're saying.
Mm.
Sometimes they'll hit a melody that I recognize, but that doesn't make any difference either, because who knows? Maybe the words are so totally different. But something
Mm.
about the music alone is enough to reach me and invite me to a level of consciousness that's different from wherever I was, before the music came on. And so I'm not sure about the answer. I mean, I know that works the same way with Sinatra. For me, it works the same with Sinatra. It works the same with Elton John. It's a different kind of thing entirely if I were to put on like Kanye West, or we're just calling him Ye now, I think is what he wants
Oh,
to
I
do.
can't keep track, but
The
yeah.
artist known as Ye. But so I don't know. I think maybe maybe the music is enough.
I think it's a really interesting point because now you're making me think about my favorite Icelandic music and just instrumental music too in
Right.
general,
Yeah.
where there's no lyrics and also when there's no cultural reference either. Especially, I love the band Sigur Rós, which is they're Icelandic. Like that. I grew up listening to them as a teenager, and their music since day one has taken me literally into another world, into a whole etheric, heavenly realm, and uh, and they're quite well known now. Like they're quite a popular artsy rock, post rock kind of band, but like cinematic and very
Yeah.
grandiose soundscapes. But and the lead singer Yancy just has this weird voice and beautifully weird, but so unique and so odd and so heavenly. And again, that's a quality and the love and the emotion and the consciousness behind that music is quite palpable, very very evident from day one. And I think we all know this when we hear any artist that is pouring their soul into something, you feel it immediately. You don't have to necessarily
Yeah.
even love the style or the genre, but you'll probably still sit and listen to it just because it's so raw. Like I'm witnessing some just local live flamenco guitar in Spain. Oh my
Right.
God,
Oh,
the
yes.
passion behind that. Oh my God,
So
it's amazing.
does it take a big ego to be able to sustain this kind of thing? Like you were talking about Zigaros and Yancy, do you have a feel for, like, in comparison to their commitment to the music, or I don't know, I don't even know how to measure that. Like ego is not a thing that you normally measure in a good way, right?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. Ego is something that we have. We don't want to discard it completely. It runs the show a lot too much in our current society, but it's not like it's like all the things like our we were talking about the was it David Hawkins'
Yeah, yeah.
consciousness map, right? Map of consciousness. And just because you're experiencing anger doesn't mean that's a bad thing. We have anger for a reason, but we're just trying to move out of always feeling angry. And so it's the same with the ego. It's like we don't want the ego running the show, but I think you're right. Like we have it for a reason, and there needs to be a little healthy dose of it in these artists. And I think I would use an example like Sigur Rós just because I've seen them live 3 times now, and I get a very humble
Mhm.
presence from them. But they're quite massive. That no one really knows about them until you know about them, and then they sell out stadiums worldwide. It's kind of a funny phenomenon. So they're quite at a point that they could easily have an ego, and it certainly doesn't come across. And I don't see any much signs of it. But there's enough to be like, well, we are worth it. Our music's awesome. You got to listen to this. that is a bit of ego, but that's healthy ego, because that, I think, is that there's like a strength behind that to then project out on these huge platforms and let it be reached by a major audience. So it's a good point, right? Do we want a healthy little dose of ego, perhaps? I
Or
don't know.
do you need a big dose of it to be able to sustain the bigness of the humility? Like, is it a combination act, right? I've never thought of Elton John or Sinatra as being egoless, but I've never thought of either one of them as being like overly narcissistic,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know?
I don't. Those two, it's those two. It's hard because we don't. I don't know any. I don't know them too well, and they're. I feel like there's a solid ego. Certainly with Sinatra, probably more, maybe more than Elton, but hard to say. It's really hard to say. I would say certainly more. The both Elton and Sinatra would have a large. I would guess would have a much larger ego than these, more artsy, eclectic Icelandic groups or something like
But
that.
none of them, even the artsy, eclectic groups, none of them seem to be fragile,
Exactly.
right? You've got to have
Exactly.
some kind of
So we're
some kind of guts
talking
to go on stage,
some kind of a balance.
some kind
Yeah,
of a
that's
balance. And
interesting.
I mean, it's weird because you wonder how the person serves the art, right? And to do that and sustain that for a lifetime. I mean, how old is Tony Bennett? He's still performing, right?
Still going, right?
Sustain that for a lifetime. There seems to be some sort of combination that works, you
Mm.
know, or like anybody from the Stones,
Oh my God.
right?
Blood
Whereas,
transfusions and all. Yeah.
right, right, and yet, we've got guys that off themselves in their 30s.
Hmm.
There's a tragedy around music too, and we all feel the loss. Like
Yeah.
when we lose a fantastic performer. I was just introduced to a musician, singer, songwriter whose name I don't remember right now, but she was one of those amazing people who had all this talent, got onto America's Got Talent, and was doing what she was doing in spite of having terminal cancer.
Mm.
Even though she had like a 2% chance of living, she still gave it her all the whole time. And she passed away in late February. A beautiful soul
Mm.
who came to do a job and did that job with joy and all of that, right? And the one that I do remember, Eva Cassidy, who did the same kind of thing, uh, left a beautiful legacy of music.
Mm.
And who knows, because she wasn't around long enough for anybody to really get it, what level of consciousness to be really sort of mathematical about it. Um, Eva Cassidy could have had versus Sinatra versus anybody, right?
Mm.
But the music had a way of speaking that was beyond the person.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess where I'm going here is that, yeah, I think the ego is necessary to keep that going. Even if you know that your chance of life is 2%, the ego is still there driving you to give what you've got in a way that's beautiful and humble.
Mm.
Even
Yeah.
though, you're not going to live very long. But if you didn't have the ego and, the guts to stand on stage and do what you do, we would have never heard that.
That's such a good point. Such
Right?
a good point. And I wonder, like, with the Kurt Cobains, or I've been going through a bit of a Jeff Buckley phase recently,
Oh,
and
yes, another cool. Oh my
oh my
gosh.
God, what a
Yeah.
tragedy, but what a talent. And like
Incredible. That
his
guy,
music just resonates. Oh my,
iconic.
I know. And his voice, and I mean, his voice is shaped, like, I know Tom York from Radiohead talks about his big influence of his, and I think Chris Martin from Coldplay as well, and
Yeah.
many other vocalists have referenced Jeff Buckley. This guy only had one album,
Yeah.
just one album.
Yeah.
That's
What
it,
album?
an EP.
Played in a coffee shop,
Yeah.
in whatever, in the village, right? Greenwich Village.
He would do open mics before his actual shows too. He would go to like random open mics, play for free, you
Yeah.
know, and blow people away because he's Jeff Buckley. And oh my God, what a talent and what a tragedy. And you got to wonder too, like, I mean, it's interesting. And I'm starting now to be like, this is getting into like psychology here, but like, what the difference between ego and drive, and that, and not ambition, but that sense of like urgency to be like, no, this is what I'm here to do. Like that mission, I guess, like,
Yeah. The
right? Where,
mission.
where your soul's on a mission to be blank, to be the, amazing activist, or to be an amazing diplomat, or to be an amazing musician, right? And these are people that are fully in the pursuit of that calling,
Yeah.
and that's the energy they're getting. And there's certainly ego, and then ego can can take you way too far where you're all about the accolades, all about the awards, all about the money. But with enough ego, you're at that point where you're like, I know I need big stages, big audiences, because I have a freaking powerful message, and like you guys need to hear this.
Yeah.
I think that's like the happy medium that these artists all, I think, seem to have in common is that enough of an
Yeah. The
ego
ones who
where,
sustain it, like,
yeah.
who manage to live their gift fully.
And I think it translates into their music, like we were saying, because I feel that strength and that, that confidence, that like this is what I'm communicating in this song. You feel that through the music with a healthy dose of ego. I think if there wasn't enough in there, it would sound like a lot of other artists that it's like, it's okay, it's fine. It sounds like a little bit of this or something a little else, or it's not quite there, not quite hitting that mark. Yeah, because maybe they're trying to sound a little bit like someone else, and they're not in their fullest expression. And I think that's another big thing too. I'm certainly learning as myself with my music, but observing that in all the greats where they're just so them. They're no other artist. They are themselves.
Yes.
No
Yes.
one's gonna sound like Elton John. No one's gonna sound like Frank Sinatra. Even the impersonators, because it's that energy. And then they know that, so they're like, I'm not trying to go out there and sound like another artist or to try to be as good as whoever. I'm just gonna go out there and do my thing.
So there
Fully.
is a level of surrender because you've got to put all the other stuff aside. It's not like Sinatra has to say, "Oh God, I got to sing, New York, New York for the thousand somethingth time." I wonder if I'll make it. It's like, that's my song. That's who I am. I mean, at that level, that's who I am, right? So off I go, and it's one more chance to be Sinatra.
The closest I got was seeing a play that I think came off Broadway and came up to Toronto and our equivalent of Broadway, and it's called The Rat Pack, and it was is Sinatra and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. Who was the fourth? I always forget the fourth guy. There's
Yeah.
usually a fourth, but anyway, those are the big three, and it was so fun. I loved the show. I loved all of it, but I knew in my head too. Still, I'm like, but imagine if it was the real Rat Pack,
Right.
They did a great job. Like they did as good a job as you could have done, in my opinion. But it's just that it's not the same essence. It's not the same consciousness, right? It's
But
not the
isn't that
real
sort of
Sinatra.
it's like it's offering a bow, you know,
Mm.
where there needs to be one. It's like, we know we're not them, but we're going to honor them by doing this.
Which is what I loved about it. And
Yeah.
even the opening, the guy, there's a it was like dressed in a tux. He comes out on stage. He starts talking like 1950s Italian mob gangster. All right, everyone, keep your phones off. If I hear any rings, there's gonna be words afterwards. And then, all right, enjoy the show. They're playing up like all the mob connections and mafia connections with the Rat Pack and Sinatra, and they're playing fun with it. And
Yeah.
I appreciated that, and it's exactly like you said. They were taking a bow. They were honoring that era and those artists, and having it. And that's why it was so fun, is because they were acknowledging all of that and not trying to like just be that. So they knew that there's a separation, and they honored that, and that's why it was great. But it always made me still again wonder, like, what would that sound like? Just like I saw the other musical, We Will Rock You, which is a Queen musical.
Right. Right.
So cool to have an ensemble choral, like chorus of people singing the Queen music. It's the best. But still, I was like, but what if Freddie was there? What would
Yeah.
that sound like, right?
Exactly. I know.
Oh, Freddie.
My wife and I were in a tribute band, a Mama's Papa's tribute band, for a while,
Oh, great.
and had that same kind of experience. Like, what would have it been like if Cass, were here? And you cannot not do that music without having those thoughts. I don't know how many people can sing like Sinatra. Goodness knows. Michael Bublé, let's pick him,
Sure.
right? But he's also got his own lane where, yes, some of the songs are the same songs, but he's got his Bublé on it, right? The way that
Exactly.
Tony Bennett has his Tony Bennett on it. And, it's like all of that. And so the music is there. And even the space editing probably tell the difference, between the voice. Well, that's somebody else singing, right?
Yeah.
Even
It's
without knowing
frequency.
the
You can
words.
tell.
but something about it is setting it apart. It's some that consciousness thing that we can't measure or identify.
It's got to be. It's a great filler word because it's true, right? It's the same with any. Excuse me. We can get out of music for a moment. Like in film, actors, let's look, actors and actresses,
Yes.
right? It's the
Yes.
exact same thing. I like name like I was just watching Ocean's 11 the other night, so I'm thinking of George Clooney right now in my head, or Brad Pitt. But like these are just iconic actors who are kind of, I mean, they're great actors, but let's be honest, like you're seeing them because it's the actor, it's not really the character they're playing. And that's
Right.
when all those actors get to that level, it's so like the even just now I'm getting flashes of like Audrey Hepburn or these like Marilyn Monroe, like these obviously iconic personalities, consciousnesses that we fall in love with because of their presence, their energy. And I had a funny story when I was 18, traveling in London, England, backpacking, and one night stumbled across a movie premiere. This was at the time a Christopher Nolan film called The Prestige. It starred Hugh Jackman, Scarlett Johansson, Michael Caine, Christian Bale, and fantastic film. Anyway, I was at the premiere of it, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and all of a sudden, this one limo pulls up, and Michael Caine walks out. I'm like, oh my God, it's Michael Caine. So cool. He seemed very approachable, though. He seemed really like, I could have a beer with this guy. Really down to earth, nice, cool guy. Soft spoken, just kind of doing his thing. A couple of the other actors, Andy Serkis and some other really great actors that had come out. I was like, great, cool. It's so cool to see them. But then, what was it? I think it was Hugh Jackman then got there. And this guy comes out, and it's like next level charisma radiating from this guy. Like one of the best looking humans I've ever seen in real life, first of all, but also it's not just the physical good looks. It's this charisma. It's this aura. It's this energy. It's the consciousness. And I was just floored at this guy's presence. All he did was just walk down a freaking red carpet. Yeah. But I was transfixed. I'm like, well, no wonder you're so sick. No wonder you are who you are, because I'm transfixed just watching you pick up a piece of garbage off the ground or something, Right. Like, no wonder you're a leading man actor. And then afterwards, I had the same with Scarlett Johansson. She comes out of the limo, and I'm just like jaw dropped to the ground. I'm like, wow, I've never seen such a gorgeous, incredible human being. Again, radiating charisma. Your eyes are just magnetized to that person. It's got to be the consciousness.
Yeah, it must be. Because I know Ella had that, and Whitney Houston, and Louis Armstrong.
Oh, yeah.
I got to go to a live Wynton Marsalis concert once. And I'd never seen him before. Of course, I'd heard him a lot, but I'd never seen him. And that presence was there. And it can only be consciousness. Chris?
It has to be.
It has to be. And just lump it all in. That's the word. Or spirituality.
It's the best one I can think of. Consciousness. It's because it's not just spirituality can be more like interpreted of a way that we navigate life, spiritual practices, things like that. Consciousness it's the essence of who we are.
It crosses all the practices.
Exactly. It's just life. Consciousness.
It's just there. I have never been in the presence of the Dalai Lama. Watched him plenty, but I was in the presence of Trungpa Rinpoche once, and it was one of those things where when you came into the room, you felt that same kind of response, like you did with Hugh Jackman or whatever. It's that same feeling. It's not there's a charismatic thing about these very spiritual teachers, but it's not the movie star. But it's that kind of energy, because I felt that energy with musicians that I've seen, famous musicians in the room. Not even sometimes knowing what it was, but then consciously sometimes also knowing what it was and connecting those experiences. It's like, wow, that happened, right? And here's, so, obviously actors have a totally different job than a spiritual teacher, but the presence is the same. That feeling of presence, which is in some ways egoless, but also very powerful. But not in a powerful ego manipulative way, powerful in an inclusive way, maybe in an energy transmission. It's like their little energy devices that their job is just give out energy, right? Give out energy. Give out energy.
I could see that Hugh Jackman's a very high energy guy. He's just like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, what's going on? Woo! You know, like very engaged and like you're like, wow, this guy's operating on a high level of energy.
exactly. Oh, I've seen some of the performances he's done. Wasn't he the guy in the movie about the circus guy? What was his name? It was a movie musical that they made.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. It's a
Right.
musical because he's a great singer too. That's the other hilarious thing. He actually started in theater and in
Yeah, he does musical
theater.
theater
You're like,
like
oh, you
craziness.
sing too?
And
Of course you do.
he did the opening number for the Tonys one year that
Mm.
was incredible. I was just like, wow, this is amazing. You see him in the movies, it's like, okay, well, he's acting stuff like that, but that's only just a part of this incredible talent that he has. It was a
It's
P.T.
amazing.
Barnum movie. What is that? There's a great song from it too. Um,
It's gonna. It's not the
we'll get it
illusionist. That's a
anyway
different
down the
film,
road.
but I know what you're talking about.
So there's that. So I guess what I want to say about this is how much of consciousness is that peaceful, like monks sitting in the cave thing, and is that at the same sort of level of power as um, watching Whitney Houston take a breath?
So such a good question because like you look at the monks meditating. Like let's look at the Dalai Lama for example, and then yeah, you compare it to like someone like Whitney Houston, right?
Yeah.
Very different, clearly, right?
Right. Yeah. Obvious.
And completely different life paths. One obviously a lot more self-destructive than the other in some regards. Different spiritual path, a lot of differences, but at the same time, you look at the consciousness and that like we can call it the essence that's in that physical body that we call Whitney Houston or Dalai Lama,
I
and
like the word essence. Yeah.
there's something about again when she's in her element when she's singing I'm like that's bringing me closer to source universe god whatever you want to
Yeah.
use that hearing her sing brings me to that like wow like the almost that like especially if it was live or something and you really feel like her voice takes you somewhere just like the energy and the voice of the Dalai Lama when he speaks when he laughs that takes you somewhere too. And I feel like that's where they have that commonality, even though their lives and even just the way they live their lives, some with a lot more ego than others perhaps, but it's that essence is very especially when they're in their zone of genius and doing what their mission is, whether it's singing, acting, speaking, writing, whatever. You feel it. You feel it.
Definitely. Definitely. I feel that same kind of thing. I mean, I feel that powerful surge when the star comes on stage at the opening of the concert and everybody just jumps up and goes crazy, right? And I also feel that. So one of my favorite shows is The Detectorists, written by Mackenzie Crook, who played a pirate in the Pirates of the Caribbean. He's the guy with the big eyes,
Mm.
scrawny guy, big eyes. But he wrote this 3 series, very quiet, very subdued English comedy. And the only reason to watch all of it is the last episode. Because in the last episode, first of all, everything comes together as it should. But secondly, is when you really get the insight into what their consciousness of these characters is all about and why they're built the way they are and what they do and all of that. And you get that same kind of feeling as when you watch the Dalai Lama laugh,
Mm.
or when you jump up at a concert, when everybody comes, it's like that same kind of amazing feeling inside
Mm.
from a
Like what
very quiet little thing, right?
it's like all art that resonates I think brings you to that place.
Yes.
You made me think of Lord of the Rings, like I feel
Yes.
that euphoric like
Yeah.
wow, and there's like certain scenes certain moments where the music and
Oh
the
my gosh.
action and the dialogue and the story have all come to a point where you're like oh my god it's so
I get it.
incredible.
Right. No, but favorite moment from that is in the second, I think. No, it's at the end of the first one. They've been rescued by the Eagles, and Thorin is dead. He's
Oh, in the
basically,
Hobbit, yeah,
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 in the
yeah.
Hobbit, and Gandalf brings him back to life. And Thorin gets up, and he's this, hard ass, ego driven guy, and he starts to take it out on Bilbo. And then he says, "And I've never been so wrong in my life."
Ah, I love that
Right?
line.
It's like, oh my gosh. You got to be the person to say those lines, right? And you can see the whole thing just dissolves there. And, never got to see Sinatra live, never have seen Elton John live. But there are those moments that happen
Mm-hmm.
where all of a sudden, whatever the big shot ego is gone.
Mm.
And it's just you.
Mm.
And the person who's there is sort of like the energy communicator. And it all happens. And I don't know, it makes me weep when I see
Mm.
those kinds of things. When I feel that, when I'm there for that, right?
I can't not cry watching Lord of the
Right.
Rings.
Right. Oh my gosh. Oh, so many moments in Lord of the Rings. So those
Yeah.
moments, I mean, we live for that stuff.
We do, and that's why we love consuming, movies, TV shows, stuff like that. Sometimes, yeah, it's a distraction, and that's probably when we might want to get off those devices and do some other things, perhaps. But movies, TV, and music. I mean, it's just beautiful. Video games, beautiful mediums. I had a really emotional experience playing a Spider-Man video game not too long ago. There's beautiful video games like The Last of Us and other really stunning, stunning video games that just take you through a really emotional journey. So it doesn't matter what the medium is. It's the consciousness behind it. It's the essence. It's that feeling and that love definitely that goes into the creation of that whatever it is you're experiencing. And that's why we love these. Like, you really think about, like, what do people do for fun? What do people do on their downtime? I mean, there's lots of things, but one of the main ones I could certainly say is consuming what we would call entertainment, which is basically in the form of different art forms. And because we're looking for a feeling, we're looking
Yeah,
for
something real.
some connection that just something that takes me a little bit further to, further, or almost takes me back to who we really are. Because we get, I think one of the big things in life is that we just get so distracted from who we really are and why we're really here.
Yeah.
It's very easy to get distracted, like nothing, no judgment towards anyone who does that, because it's a crazy, busy, loud world. But we do get taken away from that. So in those moments, like in Lord of the Rings, where you're just like, my heart is like, oh, and the tears are coming, you're like, that's because it's reminding you, of who you are, of
Yes.
who we are.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. And I like that you said no judgment, because I'm thinking of Daredevils, and we all think of Daredevils pretty crazy, right? But if getting as close to that moment is a peak experience that happens when you're, free falling from 17 miles up or however long
Mm.
that guy went, or, flying a kite inches from the rocks in a crevasse, coming down the mountain, or whatever it is that is really trying to get to that moment for you.
Mm.
Um, there's no sense of danger. There's just a sense of connection in that, right?
Mm.
If there was a sense of danger, they wouldn't do it. I mean, obviously there's a sense of danger, but the idea is breaking through that to find out how close to God can fear take you,
Mm. I
right?
love that.
Something like that. Goodness knows that isn't me, but I have that feeling about it, because it's the same thing. We're on stage, we're pushing ourselves to a limit.
Some people would rather jump off a cliff with a parachute than go on stage and perform. I
Well,
know that's a
exactly.
huge fear for some people.
Exactly. And I understand for Streisand, stage fright is a huge thing.
Mm.
So every time that she's singing in public, it's that daredevil kind of a thing, to be able to reach in that deep and make it happen. And, whether you're sitting at the feet of the Dalai Lama, or you're fortunate to be able to have seen Sinatra or Elton John, or you're a base jumper, whatever it is, I can't pass judgment on that.
No.
And, sometimes it works, and then sometimes it doesn't. And, the consequences are bigger one way or the other. But who's to say that chasing that experience is wrong, right? Whether it's in a video game or anything, chase that experience, right? Isn't that the end of the day? Find out what your lane is and how you can get to that,
Mm.
and then do that as often as you can. I was talking with a guy, and he's like, Bill, I had this experience, and if you can recreate that experience for me, I'm your man. And I'm like, well, I really can't recreate that experience for you, but I can show you how you can recreate that reliably for yourself.
Mm.
And isn't that what it's all about?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's going to concerts, great. If it's, singing the Om, great. If it's sitting in silence for 30 years, whatever it is, isn't that what we want?
Yeah, 100%. It's something that we we need that sense of connection so much. And because there's so many things in our current civilized world that take us away from that,
Right.
it's like constantly having to remember, and I think you said it so well, where it's once you find, you are the best GPS for your life, and using your emotions, using your feelings as guidance to be like, I like how this makes me feel when I do woodworking and I'm building a table for my friend. I feel so I feel so good. I feel so purposeful. I feel so satisfying. Those are the feelings you want to pursue, whether that's going skiing, base jumping, playing music, writing a book, reading a book, whatever it is, those are the things that continually will take you closer to that place that we're always yearning for, that we're always looking for. And typically that's what we consume: art, entertainment, to feel some sort of connection back to that in a different way, to feel that emotional kind of feeling. And I think that's really well said. I think that's a great takeaway for the audience listening is, find that thing that makes your consciousness sing and feel so good, and be like, oh my God, I can't wait till I do that again. Like, that just felt so good, and that can literally be anything. It's whatever. And you're the only person, those of you listening, you're the only person that will know. We can't tell you. Bill can't. I can't. But you can, because you know yourself the best, right?
It's great to be on the front lines, be the cheerleaders for all of this, though.
You got this.
I love to see people coming awake, right?
Absolutely.
Even if you're already thinking you're awake, there's still more.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong wherever you're at in your journey. Like, that's exactly where you're meant to be.
Exactly perfect. Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
No judgment.
However bad it feels, right? That's still good.
Oh, it's great.
Here we go with all the judgment terms again. So yes, you said it so well, Chris. Yeah. Wherever you are in your journey, it's a beautiful place. Thank you for letting us be here.
Thank you, audience, for letting us share that with you. And I one last thought. There's a really great comedian slash self-help guy, Kyle Cease. He's an American comedian, and he has a great thing where every time he's experiencing, let's say, on the map of consciousness, a lower vibrational emotion like anger, jealousy, grief, whatever, he'll say, I'm angry, and I love that. I am really sad today, and I love that. It's like we are in full acceptance of all of the things. It's okay to feel whatever the hell you're feeling today. That's okay. You can like whatever music you want to like. You can pursue whatever activities make you feel blissful and make you feel closer and connected to the universe, to yourself. All of that's okay. You got to go out there and figure that out for yourself. And guess what? It's a really fun exercise and fun journey.
Oh my gosh, what a journey. Yes. What a journey.
Best kind.
The best kind. Thank you for listening in on our conversation and for taking time to show your appreciation with a like, share, or subscribe. Discussions of music, healing, and consciousness is a practice of spontaneity, and we welcome your comments, ideas, and questions. There are ways to connect with us in the show notes, so let us hear from you. Until next time, this is Bill Protzman along with Chris Noble wishing you great musical health. Samara Huchaya.